walked out like he always does, like the room was already his before he arrived. And it was. It always is. Eddie Murphy settled into the guest chair with the particular ease of a man who has spent 50 years being the most comfortable person in any room he enters. The Late Show audience was on their feet before he'd said a word, not because they were prompted to be, but because that's what happens when Eddie Murphy walks into a space. The air changes, the temperature rises, something electric and warm and slightly dangerous moves through the room, and everyone in it feels it simultaneously and responds to it the same way. They lean forward, they smile, they prepare themselves to receive something. Stephen greeted him warmly. The band played. The audience settled back into their seats, still buzzing. And for the first several minutes, everything was exactly what anyone watching expected it to be. Sharp, fast, generous. Eddie Murphy at full capacity, which was a thing very few people in the history of American entertainment had ever been able to match. They talked about the new project, about what it meant to still be doing this, still be choosing the work, instead of letting the work choose him after 5 decades in an industry that had tried several times to write his ending and had been wrong every time. Eddie was expansive and funny and entirely in control, the way he always was, the way he had been since he was a teenager in Brooklyn who discovered that rooms full of people would do anything he wanted them to do if he just opened his mouth and let the thing inside him out. Stephen smiled through all of it. He asked the right questions. He laughed in the right places. And then, about 15 minutes in, he set down his note cards. "Eddie," he said, "I want to ask you something personal." Eddie raised an eyebrow. "How personal?" "Very," Stephen said. "All right." Eddie spread his hands. "Go ahead. Who was the most important person in your life growing up?" The question landed simply, without fanfare, the way the most important questions always do. Eddie looked at Stephen for a moment. The performance was still there. It was always there. It was part of his cellular structure at this point. But something behind it had shifted almost imperceptibly. "Charlie," he said, just the name. Nothing else for a moment. "My brother, Charlie." The studio was quiet in a way it hadn't been all night. Not the hushed anticipation of a punchline coming. Something different. Something that recognized without being told that they had just crossed into different territory. "Tell me about him," Stephen said softly. Eddie looked at his hands. A gesture so unlike his usual physicality, so still, so contained, that it said more than anything that had come before it. "Charlie was 4 years older than me," Eddie said. "And when we were kids, he was the funny one, not me. People forget that. They look at what I became, and they assume I was always the one, always the center of it, always the guy the room was waiting for. But growing up, that was Charlie. Charlie was the one who could walk into any situation and make it better just by being there. He had this gift for people, for reading what a room needed and giving it to them." Stephen nodded once. "I learned to be funny watching him," Eddie continued. "I learned timing. I learned how to read a crowd. I learned that comedy isn't just about the joke. It's about the person delivering it, the relationship between the performer and the room. I learned all of that from Charlie. He was my school." "When did you start performing?" Stephen asked. 15, Eddie said. "First open mic. And Charlie was there, front row. And I remember standing up there thinking, if I can make Charlie laugh, if I can do what he does to a room, then I'm doing something real." "Did you?" Eddie smiled, something in it that wasn't entirely happy. "Yeah, I did. And something happened after that night that I've spent a long time thinking about." Stephen waited. "I started going up faster than him," Eddie said. "A lot faster. Within a couple of years, I was at the comic strip. I was getting noticed, things were moving, and Charlie was still in Brooklyn, still working, still funny, still the guy who could make any room better. But the industry wasn't looking at him. They were looking at me." He paused. "And when things really started happening, When Saturday Night Live came, when the movies came, when everything changed almost overnight, I went. I just went. I went to Los Angeles, I went into this whole other world, and He stopped. I didn't bring Charlie. The silence in the studio was complete. Not right away, Eddie said. Not for years. I told myself it was because I needed to establish myself first. I told myself it was because I didn't want the industry to see him as my brother instead of his own person. I told myself a lot of things. He looked up. And some of those things were probably even true, but some of them weren't. Some of it was just, I was moving fast and Charlie was back there and I didn't stop. Stephen was very still. How long? Stephen asked quietly. Years, Eddie said. Years where Charlie was in Brooklyn and I was in Hollywood, and the distance between us wasn't just geographical. He paused. He never complained. That's the thing I keep coming back to. He never once called me and said, "Why didn't you bring me with you?" He never made me feel the absence. He was Charlie. He showed up when I needed him. He was proud of me. He cheered louder than anyone, and he stayed in Brooklyn and built his own thing and eventually found his own way into the work, and he was brilliant at it, and we had years together that were everything. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. But, Stephen said. But I left him there, Eddie said. The three words landing with a weight that the studio clearly felt. You could see it in the way 300 people shifted almost imperceptibly in their seats. I made it out of Brooklyn, and I left him there, and he never once made me feel bad about it. He never once, not in all the years we had together afterward, not in all the conversations we had, not in any of the moments where it would have been so easy for him to just say something, even something small. He never made me feel bad about it. His voice had changed. Still his voice, that distinctive instrument that had made America laugh for 50 years, but stripped of everything that wasn't essential, stripped down to just the truth of it. And Charlie died in 2017, Eddie said. Leukemia. And I was there. I was there at the end. I was there through all of it. We had time to say what needed to be said. But there's one conversation we never had. There's one thing I never said to him directly, and I think about it all the time. Stephen stood up from behind his desk. Without announcement, without drama, he walked around and sat on the edge of the desk facing Eddie. Not the host anymore, just a man. What was it? Stephen asked. Eddie looked at him, and for a moment, just a moment, the most guarded performer of his generation let everything down. I never said I was sorry, Eddie said, for the years I left him in Brooklyn, for going so fast that I forgot to look back. I never said, I know what those years cost you. I know what it meant to watch from a distance while your little brother became something, and to do it with nothing but grace and love and zero resentment. I know what that took. And I never told him how much I understood what it took. His jaw was tight. His eyes were bright. Because I do understand, Eddie said. Now that he's gone and I can't tell him. Now I understand exactly how much grace it took. And I understand that what he gave me, that silence, that forgiveness, that complete and total refusal to ever make me feel the weight of what I'd done, that was the most generous thing anyone has ever given me. More than any award, more than any opening weekend, more than any review. Charlie Murphy gave me his silence on something he had every right to speak about, and I never thanked him for it. Stephen looked at him. His own eyes were wet. His expression carried the particular quality of a man who has just been handed something and knows its weight. Eddie, Stephen said, you just thanked him. Eddie looked at Stephen. Right now, Stephen said, in front of everyone. You just said the thing you never said. And I believe that wherever Charlie is, he heard it. And I believe, because everything you've told me about who he was tells me this, I believe he already knew. He knew you knew. He knew you understood. He was just waiting for you to be ready to say it out loud." Something broke open in Eddie Murphy's face then, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. The way things break open when they've been held together for a long time and the holding finally stops. One tear, then another. He pressed his hand to his eyes briefly and then lowered it, and he didn't try to make it funny. He didn't reach for the deflection. He didn't do any of the things that 50 years of performing had trained him to do when a moment threatened to overwhelm him. He just sat there and felt it. "He was the funniest person I ever knew," Eddie said finally. His voice steady again, rough at the edges, but steady. "People think that's me, but it was always him first. Everything I am up there came through him. He was the school, and I was just the student who got the diploma." Stephen nodded. "Then every time you walk onto a stage," Stephen said, "he's there. In every room, every laugh, every moment when you walk in and the air changes. That's Charlie too. That's what he gave you. And that's what you're giving everyone who gets to be in a room with you." Eddie looked out at the audience for a long moment, not performing for them, just seeing them. "Charlie," he said, his voice dropping to something almost private, almost not for the cameras at all. "I'm sorry it took me this long, man. You deserved to hear it while you were here. You deserved a lot of things while you were here. But I want you to know, I knew. I always knew what you did for me. I always knew what it cost you. And there hasn't been a single day since you've been gone that I haven't thought about it." He paused. "Save me a seat," he said. "I'll be loud when I get there." The studio rose. Not immediately. The applause started somewhere in the middle and moved outward slowly, the way things move when they're coming from a real place rather than a prompted one. 300 people standing, not because they were told to, but because they had witnessed something and their bodies couldn't stay seated under the weight of it. Stephen let it breathe. Then he looked at Eddie directly. "You know what I think?" he said. "I think Charlie Murphy left Brooklyn before you did. He left the moment he decided to give you that silence. That's not something a man does who's stuck somewhere. That's something a man does who's already arrived." Eddie looked at him, and for just a moment, the thing that had been on his face since he said the name Charlie, that particular weight, became something else, not lighter exactly, but different. The weight of grief held alongside the weight of love, which is different from grief held alone. "Yeah," Eddie said softly. "Yeah, that sounds like him." That night, laughter gave way to grace, and television remembered what it was for.